The world is changing fast, and so are the local real estate markets. Don't worry, though. We've got you covered. Welcome to the Real Estate Revolution.
This is the Real Estate Revolution podcast. I am Kip Lohr, your host with Lohr Real Estate, and I have Ryan Neal in the house today as my co-host. Hello, Ryan Neal.
Hello, Kip Lohr. How are you today?
I am well. We had such a great show last week that we had to split it into two separate episodes. We had Kat Woodman from Impact Investors in the studio, and the first part of that show, which was last week's episode, kind of talked about investing in the market, what impact investment is versus typical traditional investments in the market, and some strategies to employ in weird times, I guess is the short way to put it. And this week's show is a continuation of last week's interview with Kat, and we will be talking about her relocation from the Bay Area to the Eugene, Springfield area and what it was like to do that kind of during COVID. So that's going to be a good one. It's a continuation of last week's show. Before we drop right into our weekly market report, I do want to mention that we are in some pretty extraordinary times in the real estate market. We're seeing lots of shifts in activity, and most poignantly, the interest rates are definitely starting to be an issue for folks. And so we're going to add to our weekly market report brought to you by Mortgage Express, with our local lender of Brad Tauser giving us, the weekly 30-year fixed rates to kind of use that in context with the rest of the information that Ryan will give you every week. And yeah, I just think it's really important that we add the weekly interest rate changes, because they are happening on a weekly basis right now, to our weekly market report.
That's right. Such a huge factor in the crazy real estate market that we've seen since the summer of 2020 has been historically low interest rates. And what we're really seeing, and really it's just been in the past few weeks, those interest rates are really starting to increase dramatically. It hasn't been as gradual as I think many of us may have perhaps hoped that they would. That, particularly if you're a buyer, you've probably been hearing that, hey, interest rates are forecasted to go up in 2022, but it's really just hit us kind of suddenly here.
Yeah, something to look out for, but it's going to be something that'll be gradual. Yeah, it's been pretty phenomenal, and maybe we'll invite Brad Tauser with Mortgage Express back to the show to talk about maybe some of the causes of that. But the reality is that we've seen a 1 point interest rate increase just in the last week. And so why don't you just go ahead and take it away?
All right. So with mortgage rates fluctuating so much, we promise you weekly updates. As of today, March 28th, 2022, the 30-year fixed rate on a 20% down mortgage is right here around 5% locally. That's a pretty dramatic increase compared even to as recent as a week ago. So buyers are going to need to recalibrate based upon these new higher rates. We'll keep you posted in coming weeks. In Eugene, we're seeing more activity in the middle end of the market, with pending sales going back up during the past week to a median of $459,000. The week before that, we saw more activity at the bottom end of the market. So basically, if we look at it month over month compared to February, prices are appreciating modestly. We haven't seen dramatic increase in prices, but they've gone up just a little bit. We'll have our end of the month numbers for you next week, but it's looking like the bottom line just isn't too different. Anecdotally, in Eugene's market, the most desirable properties and the most desirable locations are going for more than ever now. But the overall quality of inventory available is also on the decline. It's an interesting dynamic. There's a lot of inventory that's kind of sitting on Eugene's market that just isn't that compelling to buyers. And that's keeping prices from going up too much overall, even though we're seeing these pretty drastic increases actually in properties that have the most desirable finishes and are in the most desirable locations. In Eugene, there continue to be more new listings than pending sales, but the difference is very slight. And basically, Eugene's inventory is still hovering near record low numbers. This isn't really normal. We'd expect to see a nice influx of inventory really starting around this time of year, but it still hasn't materialized. In Springfield, activity continues to be weighted toward the bottom end of the market, both from buyers and sellers. Less expensive homes have been hitting the market, and the higher-end homes that have gone on Springfield's market are continuing to go really fast. Like in Eugene, inventory remained pretty flat in Springfield over the past week, though it's up a good amount from the record lows that we saw earlier in the month. In Bend, inventory continues to increase modestly. Right now, there are 187 residential homes on the market. That's up from 133 at the beginning of the month. Pending sales are up during the past week to a median of $740,000, and that's still below the sale prices that we saw in February, where we were getting pretty close to $800,000. But it's probably only a matter of time before we get back up there. Inventory in the bottom half of Bend's market is continuing to be bought up, and right now what is left on the market has a median ask of $860,000. In Redmond, inventory is also a bit higher. There are 87 active properties compared to 66 at the beginning of the month. We're starting to see more buying happening toward the upper middle end of the market. Last week's pending sales hit a median of $549,000. Meanwhile, we're seeing some more listing activity finally at the lower end of Redmond's market. There were 21 new listings the past week at a median ask of just $390,000, but these are going pending really fast. Now, all of these numbers are just, well, numbers. So with interest rates doing what they're doing, what are we expecting to see moving forward? Basically, buying activity should start dropping off a bit. The prices we're seeing now are reflective of an environment where rates were lower. Prices will not drop overnight, unfortunately for buyers, and especially this time of year when there's a lot of FOMO still operating. Buyers are trying to get into the market before rates go up even further. But this is the beginning of a process we expect will play out over the next few months. So we'll just continue to keep you posted. On to the main part of our program.
Welcome back to the Real Estate Revolution podcast. I'm Kip Lore, your host. I'm with Lore Real Estate. We have Kat Woodman in the house with Impact Investors. How are you, Kat?
That's good. How are you?
Good. Well, this is going to be the second part of our show, and we talked about all these really cool, very heady concepts about the markets and how to go about being a socially responsible investor. What I'd like to talk about now, though, is more fun. Not that other stuff wasn't fun, but, so full disclosure, Kat is a client of Lore Real Estate and myself. We helped her and her super cute daughter Delilah relocate from the Bay Area about a year and a half ago. And so I thought it would be interesting for folks that are, contemplating being in your shoes to hear kind of like what your experience was like and kind of the A to Z of what made you decide to even look at Eugene. And, once you started doing the research, how did you get hooked up with us and that kind of fun stuff?
Okay, great.
So take it away.
Okay, so I think I found you guys through my friend Nancy.
I think that's
Nancy
right.
Nancy is such a researcher. And she actually, I think, was the first of the two of us. She was really gearing up to escape. So I've been in the Bay. I was in the Bay Area from 1995 to 2020.
Wow.
So
okay,
it was a pretty long period of time. And basically from about 2003 on, both Nancy and I have been like, where can we move? How can we escape?
How do we get out of here?
But there's a vortex.
Yeah.
There's a vortex that's difficult to escape from.
Yeah,
and
I get it.
Especially once you build a business and, having a financial advising practice with clients who are used to seeing me face to face. And then when I, bought a practice that were even more local clients, I was even more really embedded in the Bay Area. So when the pandemic happened and I looked at everything that happened in 1918 and said, wow, this is probably going to be a few years.
Right.
I realized that it was an opportunity to just experiment and to see what happens.
Yeah.
Because, I had a lot of fear of leaving the area with so many clients in the Bay Area. And my daughter's dad still lives there. And, I didn't really know how it was going to be, but I sort of felt like this is the time. This is the moment. If I'm going to do it, this is the time to do it. Because I literally know that I'm or I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be seeing anyone face to face for probably 2 years.
Right.
So
right. And so
that was the circumstance.
Right. And do you think like eventually when and if things get normalized on that front, do you think you'll make trips down there to, kind of I'll spend a week down in the Bay Area and hit a bunch of clients and then come home? Or,
exactly. Yeah, that's the plan. And I'm thinking of starting that up soon. I think we're finally at that place
where you need to start getting some face time with people.
Yeah, just it's nice being with people in person. So, I think they would put up with me, they'd put up with Zoom calls, but it's fun for all of us. It's fun for all of us when we get to see each other.
Right. And the Bay Area is a nice place to visit.
Yeah.
My brother lives down there, so I love going down there. You hit the restaurants, you get the Bay Area air in your lungs, and then, you come home.
Yeah.
You come home to Eugene, right?
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Such a change. So yeah. And there were a number of different factors that made me also look up here. I mean, my friend Nancy was into it, but also my aunt and uncle live in Marcola, just outside of Springfield. And so I had been coming up here since 2000 when they moved here.
Right.
Usually, sitting in a bedroom reading Lord of the Rings and Twilight movies or Twilight books while it rained outside.
No doubt.
But it was just, it was just so beautiful and such a calming place to come to.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that. And I really wanted to live in community. I had lived in a co-op in Oakland from 2005 to 2011, I think.
Wow.
No, 2010.
Wow.
So I lived for 5 years in community, and I really liked that, and I wanted that back. So that was all of those different reasons sort of brought me to Eugene.
Yeah, I remember. So we ended up, having several conversations with Nancy before we had actually met you. And, when we first started talking to you, I remember the shifting sands of, where we started out as far as what you were looking for and obviously what you ended up with. And, I think that's one thing that for folks that are listening out there that are contemplating moving from out of area, having a big open mind of what your expectations are is really important, especially on the front end, because first of all, the market's really tight right now, so there's not a lot of inventory. So it's not like you get a whole, 30, 40, 50 houses to look at, but also just the expectation, it's very different in theory than it is being on the ground. What was it like once you got on the ground with us and we started showing you around Eugene?
Well, that was great. I liked all the tours. It was really helpful to be told, I think we actually walked through Market of Choice.
We did.
On 28th.
We did. And, we did.
And that was really great. I was like, oh, okay, I can shop here. This is very, reminiscent of organic grocery stores in
the old
California.
school.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, who was it? I was talking to somebody, I think, who moved here maybe about 5 years ago, and they were talking about how it just depends so much on what part of Eugene that you see in terms of how you might feel about it if you're really just breezing through.
Oh,
and it's
100%.
Kind of the same thing with the Bay Area.
No,
there's
100%.
parts of,
you
could go through parts of Oakland and be like, I don't want to live in,
in or around here. Yes.
In rural, ruined, the urban, just sort of urban decay. And, West Eugene is an awful lot of warehouses. So,
Northwest
so it really
Eugene,
depends on. But I feel like I barely scratched the surface because we did get here in a pandemic, and I am quite a bit of a homebody. If I like where I'm living and, all I kind of need is groceries, I'm not getting out a ton. So every time I go to a new place, I'm like, has this always been here? This is so great.
Why didn't anybody tell me about this place?
I know. Yeah. I know. I went by the two rock climbing places over on, what was that, 4th or something?
Yep.
And that was really neat. And I went to Wildcraft that night.
Oh yeah.
They were having all these events. And so it sounds like, and what my housemate said is, she's like, well, Eugene is just starting to wake up, and this is what Eugene is like, and that just, I probably hadn't seen it, probably because I hadn't left and had been mostly at home, and because of the pandemic, that it's kind of reemerging.
No, I think that's absolutely true. And so it's one thing to take that big leap of faith that you took, and then to be doing it in a time when the sidewalks are, rolled up. not just at night, but just period. The pandemic just rolled up the sidewalks, and socializing and getting to know people. I mean, I think that's been the hardest thing for folks that we've helped over the last couple of years, is just that, you get on the ground and you've left all of your friends, you've got kids and you've left their friends, and you've left your circles and the things that make you feel like home, and you're going to start this new adventure, but you can't really start the new adventure yet because you don't even know what people look like because they've got a mask on. Right. It still freaks me out when I see somebody's face after literally getting to know them without ever seeing their face, and I feel like I know them, and then I see their face and I'm like, who is that? Like, that is not what I would have pictured that person's face look like. You know what I mean? Like, I'm taken aback a little bit. I'm like, what? That's not what I pictured at all.
It's totally like those like little kids where they have those little books where you can change their clothing, where they just move the page. That's and right. Then suddenly they're wearing a different outfit. And it's kind of like that. People take their masks off and you're like, whoa, I was picturing a totally different page.
Completely a different person. Yeah, exactly. So how has it been for Delilah in her move? There's a lot of people out there that are considering making the move like you guys have, and they have kids. And how has it been?
Yeah. Well, I think now that the schools are open, because anyone making the move now will probably be moving to places where the schools are open.
Yeah.
She never really loved school all that much at any point, really. She was never somebody who was like, I can't wait to go to school.
Right.
And the solution for that is just to keep them at home for 2.5 years. And then eventually
they can't wait to go to school.
They'll start getting excited about school. Yeah. So I, because I work from home, I was able to be more cautious this last fall. So when I saw the numbers spiking, I was like, I'm not going to do this. So she basically only had maybe 2 or 3 months of in-person school last spring. And then she's been in person since January of this year.
Okay.
So she really enjoys it. She really enjoys the people here. She came home from her first day of school and said, I'm so grateful for how nice everybody was. I didn't expect that.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, Eugene people are really nice.
We are.
We are. It's a really nice group of people. And same thing when you're driving, where I feel like I'll get on the freeway and go, I can't believe they let me in. It's like, I wouldn't have let me in.
Right.
I wouldn't have been as nice as that. And I can just imagine some Oregonians saying like, yeah, you're from California.
Yeah.
Where you have to like learn to be aggressive or you will, be run off the road.
You'll get in a wreck if you're not driving aggressively. Yeah.
Yeah.
Offensive driving. It's sort of aggressive.
It's required.
Offensive driving is what it is.
Yeah. Whereas down here, I was picking up some chicken feed at Eugene Backyard Farmer, and I heard all these horns going off, and he said, "Oh, it's probably a Eugene traffic jam." And he said what he meant by that was like everyone's just at the stop sign, like all saying, "No, you go." No, you go.
Yeah, no, it's right. And that, what's funny about that is like there are literally wrecks that get caused by that, because people get to the intersection, they're like, you go, no, you go, then you go, and then they both go and wreck into each other, right? And then they go, okay, finally somebody's going to go. They both go, and then they have a fender bender. So it is a little ridiculous, but the alternative is not as fun.
Is California.
It is California.
You end up in California.
A bigger city for sure. Yeah. So would you share with me what were some of the things that we were able to help you with in the course of you relocating that you feel like, wow, I didn't know a real estate company or a real estate agent would be doing that with me?
Well, I definitely didn't know that you would be literally driving me around and giving me a tour of the place, and giving
of the city.
Yeah, right. The city.
Yeah, we weren't looking for houses. We were looking at the city.
Yeah, you were like, here's where you'll go grocery shopping. Here's the vet that I use for my dogs, and I know I got some help from you guys in terms of trying to price rooms here.
Yep.
In the duplex that I got, needed to figure out rents, and when you're coming from a place where there's no frame of reference.
Yeah.
So,
totally.
So that was really helpful. And I mean, you guys were just really responsive. For me, it was a really positive experience. And I more just felt like is it okay that like, I don't know how long this is going to take, and
Right.
I'm taking up a lot of time, and,
Yeah.
is it really worth it for you guys, so.
And you learned what? The answer to that question was yes. Right?
I learned that you guys were willing to. Whether it was worth it is up to you guys, but you were certainly very willing, which was all of you guys, which is really sweet. Yeah, it was really helpful.
Well, I appreciate the shameless plug, and the $20 is in the mail, but
no payment necessary.
All kidding aside, I think that our model is very different than, I would say, I'm pretty confidently any other company out there, that really we understand that relocating from another place, especially when you got a kid or two or three, is a big deal, and we treat it like a big deal. And a lot of the folks that reach out to us, they've never been to Eugene. I mean, they've never been to the area before. And so for me, I can't imagine moving somewhere without having somebody take you by the hand and really say, okay, here's the good and bad and the ugly of this place. And let me drive you around the areas that, you've indicated to me kind of what your vibe is. So let's drive through the areas that are going to be in alignment with that vibe. And like you say, walk you through the grocery store that you're probably going to shop at, and take you by the university if you've got kids that are getting ready to get into college. And those types of things are really important to me, because I want to make sure that you are making the right decision, and when we get to the part where it's, looking at houses, that's fun too. But we really take the helping you pin down whether this is the right spot to land for you and your family. We take that really seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see that that's true. And it's true that even though I had been coming up and visiting my aunt and uncle in Marcola, I spent almost no time whatsoever in Eugene or Springfield. So I didn't really know the towns hardly at all.
Right.
So I felt comfortable just knowing there was family nearby. I didn't have any references or knowledge. So all of that was super helpful to me, because I didn't really have it.
Yeah. And being as you kind of have this idealized version of maybe what the area is like based on Marcola, which is completely different, obviously, than, the city of Eugene. And also having this desire to maybe get into community again, which the thought of a place like Marcola is kind of alignment of maybe what the stereotype of being in community can be like. I'm living in a bus out on somebody's 10-acre parcel, that kind of deal. But what you guys ended up doing was pretty off the charts. I've never seen before. I mean, it was, we first started looking at properties that were, maybe we can put a yurt on the property, or maybe we can have a couple of tiny houses. And then we find this duplex that's up, on some property just outside of the city limits. So you kind of got the best of both worlds there, where you kind of, you're out a little bit out of town, but you're still close enough that you can come in and still feel like you have some of the urban
everything
amenities.
Is super close.
Yeah, urban amenities.
Yeah, it was definitely not what I was looking for. I was looking for like fixer-uppers that I could convert into something where there could be multiple people. But at the time, I was also nervous about the law that only allowed, 4 or 5 unrelated people to live in the same house.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, that might get in the way of my whole community ideal. So the fact that this place was a duplex was great. But then I have heard that recently they've changed that law, or that's what somebody had said to me.
Yeah, it has. I think, with the difficulty in housing that we have in Oregon, specifically in the Eugene, Springfield, and Bend Redmond areas, we are seeing, community and the local government saying, we got to do something. We got to change up the paradigm a little bit. So are there any words of wisdom for folks that are listening, as far as I wish I had done this, or I'm sure glad I knew this before I jumped, or is there anything that pops into mind that you're thinking, these are some really important things to be thinking about when you're making the jump?
I mean, there's certainly learnings I'm going through right now. But I feel like there's so much more about living in community, and that's that might be a fairly narrow subset of humans. But, I've learned, because I lived in a co-op before, I thought that a lot of that stuff would really just translate into this new, totally different situation with totally different dynamics. And,
right.
and I've learned a lot. I'm happy to talk about that. But, in terms of the city, I mean, I've been here for a year and 3/4, and I feel like no matter what, I'm definitely not going back, because I was afraid that I was afraid, like, well, if this doesn't work out, like, I guess I'll go back. And I'm just like, why would I do that? Like, I don't need to do that.
So you feel good about the decision?
I feel great about the decision. I just feel like there's so much that I love. I love the traffic here. It's like, I will have moments where I'm like, oh, this is rush hour here. That's right. Oh, it's like,
isn't that cute? This is rush hour.
Exactly.
Isn't that cute? Yeah, they call this rush hour.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I have memories of being in Mill Valley in Marin County and being on just a 2-way street where literally we're just parked and just hoping that someday we get to the highway.
Highway, yeah.
So I know that changes. I can just hear the voices in my head of the people who are like, it's you Californians coming here and you will ruin the traffic. But I know that there's also a lot of transplants here, so I try not to feel too guilty about it.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, you shouldn't. I mean, I think it's always a double-edged sword, and there are people that, maybe second, third generation Eugene person or a second, third generation Bend person, and their towns change, and that's just life. Everything changes, right? Like change is the only thing that doesn't change. You count on change. And so I'm much more in the camp of appreciating what folks like you bring to this community rather than worrying about whether I have to slow down to 30 miles an hour rather than drive at 45.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that is the thing too, is that people who do come to an area can bring like different sets of skills and different perspective. And hopefully it's not a Californication, because, I really enjoy what's here and want to help preserve that as much as possible. But
I'm a native Oregonian, and I can tell you without any hesitation that the parts of culture that Californians in particular have brought with them, I very much appreciate. Like our food here, I believe, is better. We have better restaurants in Eugene and better restaurants in Bend than we would have otherwise. We've had upper game a little bit, which I don't think is a terrible thing. And the ethic, here's the truth. One thing that is really an Oregonian thing is we love our state. We love our communities. We have deep passion for keeping the water clean, the air clean. We want to have trees to look at. We don't want to cut them all down. We want to find balance between responsibly removing timber and keeping the trees for us to enjoy when we're out hiking and biking. And so what I have found is people from out of area, whether it's California or any other part of the country, they come to Oregon because of that. And they share those values. So in a way, it's kind of a natural selection where people are attracted to Oregon that kind of have a similar ethic, I think, for the most part.
Yeah.
So
certainly I've seen that, and I hope that to be the case. And I mean, I think the food here is amazing. I think the farmers market is amazing. I think the people are really wonderful. And I haven't been there, but somebody told me about, is it a restaurant or a store where everything has been made within 100 miles, something like that?
It's a restaurant.
Does that sound familiar to you?
Yep.
It's a restaurant.
Yep.
And I hear that, and that's just both amazing and not at all surprising, just because there's so much of everything that's being created here.
That's right.
And I grew up in Iowa, so you can get corn and soybeans and maybe some pork.
Yeah.
And maybe some milk, but there's not a lot of dairy there. And that's kind of it. And living in the Midwest, surprising just how fruits and vegetables and produce out here are just such higher quality than what you get in the Midwest, which is supposed to be, the breadbasket.
Right.
But it's a whole different level out here.
Yummy food.
Yeah. Very yummy. Makes a difference.
Well, I think we blabbed as much as we possibly can. Well, that's not true. We probably blabbed as much as we need to for today, but I can't thank you enough for giving me your time today and really kind of creating an interesting show from a couple of different angles. What I do want to come back around circle-wise is just that I'd like to give you an opportunity to, if you'd like, plug Impact Investors one more time. And if there's folks that are interested in getting in touch with you or somebody with your company, they need a financial advisor. They would like some advice and places to put their money, especially in kind of uncertain times. Would you like to give people a way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is impactinvestors.com. And you can go there and contact us through the website and get a gander at me and the team. There's my business partner, Shane Johnston, and myself. You'll see Catherine Woodman, because I've shortened my name as I've gotten older, but most of my clients know me as Catherine. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Any questions or anything that comes up, anyone can feel free to reach out and contact me.
Yeah, this is a really good time to be actually talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about, because we are in a time of kind of some shifting ground underneath our feet. And I think this is becoming really on top of the mind for a lot of people is what's the next thing I need to do to make sure that my family is in good shape financially over the long haul. So again, thank you so much for joining the show, and we'll probably do this again. There's probably something else we'll be able to talk about, but we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks. Well, you've heard this 1,000 times before, but this is the Real Estate Revolution podcast. I am Kip Lohr, your host with Lohr Real Estate, and it is time for another installment of Kip's Tips. This week's tip is look before you leap, and this is a tip for folks that are looking to relocate from out of area to the Bend, Redmond, or Eugene, Springfield markets, no matter where you're coming from, across the country or from other lands beyond our shores. The idea of looking before you leap is really talking about this is a big decision that you're making, and you can only read so much about your new projected hometown online, and it's important to do a little bit deeper dive. And what we recommend is coming and visiting, take a trip out. I know that sounds pretty straightforward and kind of like no duh, but I can't tell you the number of people that we have come to our area looking to purchase a home. They've made the decision and they've never been here before. And so universally, I recommend that you take at least one trip out and get a tour from a qualified tour guide. And I just happen to know one, actually. So at Lohr Real Estate, we do a patented Lohr Real Estate area tour, whether you're looking at Bend, Redmond, or Eugene, Springfield. We actually take a half day and just drive around neighborhoods based on a short interview with you to get a sense of, what kind of vibe of neighborhood you're looking for. And then we follow that half day tour up with getting into some properties in those neighborhoods that we've identified as prospects for you. And it's a pretty unusual service. Most real estate companies don't do this. And I can't tell you the number of people that we've had come into town, do their own self-guided tours, and be very skeptical about whether or not this is the community that they want to move into. And they have a completely different experience once they've rolled around town with us. So I highly recommend that you come in and have somebody guide you around town. It's even a better idea, especially with the low inventory that we have right now. Once you've kind of decided that, yeah, we really like the Eugene Springfield area, or we really like the Bend Redmond area, we highly recommend that you relocate and rent temporarily. Usually it's going to take a few months to get you into a home purchase anyway. And so it's really a lot easier to purchase a home when you're launching that search from living in the area, which isn't to say that it's not possible. We've helped several people get into homes that don't ultimately relocate here first, but I highly recommend, relocating to the area, renting for a while. If you're moving to the Bend Redmond area and you have lived in San Diego all your life, or you've lived in Phoenix, Arizona all your life, then I highly recommend you come and live here for a year before you relocate. Our winters are not like the Midwest winters or the East Coast winters, but we do get cold in the winter in the Bend Redmond area. So I highly recommend folks that are kind of indigenous to warmer parts of the country get 3 seasons, at least the winter, the fall and winter seasons under your belt before you make a commitment to moving to the area permanently. So there you have, look before you leap, and appreciate everybody listening this week. We have a great show for you next week, but until then, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining The Revolution. We are over and out until next week, when we'll continue to fill you in on all that matters most in our local Bend and Eugene real estate scenes. See you next time on The Real Estate Revolution.